Have you ever wondered how the civilization of people would have to face and adapt to the changes and challenges brought onto them by another group?
Well then, hello and welcome. In this video, I will be telling you about the history of the Utes, the changes they had when encountering other groups, and where they ended up at the end. So, let's get started.
The Utes were a Native American group who comprised three primary groups. These groups included the Northern Utes, the Southern Utes, and the Ute Mountain Utes. Ute people used to stay in many different places around the country, like in present-day Utah, western Colorado, and northern New Mexico. The Northern Utes mainly lived in Utah, Southern Utes in Colorado, and the Ute Mountain Utes in northern New Mexico. The Utes have a unique story and culture. They were mostly known for their hunting, fishing, and crafting. They had a deep connection with nature and the surroundings around them. They had unique traditions, ceremonies, and rituals for simple traditions we have now. For example, births, marriages, and death. Here's how the Utes would do their death ceremonies. In their culture, these ceremonies were very respectful and spiritual. The Utes believed that honoring the deaths of the people's spirits would help them into getting into the afterlife. Songs, dances, and prayers were often involved during these ceremonies. Along with the deceased person, they might have thrown in personal belongings with them or placed them on their grave. The Ute culture was always about respect and ensuring a peaceful journey throughout death and getting into the afterlife. In the 17th century, the Spanish were the first Europeans to encounter the Utes. This situation caused lots of changes to happen in the Utes' lives. It introduced the Utes to horses, which ended up helping them with hunting. The horses that the Spanish introduced to the Utes made the Utes a lot stronger, but it also ended up leading to a lot more competition and sometimes violent clashes. They had a larger advantage over other indigenous groups now. The Spanish and the Utes had such a mixed relationship with each other. While the two groups were trading partners, they also got involved in a lot of conflict. Some of the reasons that conflict were involved between the two groups was due to territory and resources. Back then, the Spanish really wanted to expand their territory and continue the spread of their religion, which was Christianity. They also wanted to have more control over the more valuable resources they found on the land. And this is where the Utes get involved, because they only wanted to protect their land and the way they lived. And since these two groups had such different interests within the land, it ended up causing conflict between the two groups. Luckily enough, the Utes were skilled warriors. They used their advantages of knowing the land to help them out during the conflicts they'd have. This caused the Spanish to have a much harder time with launching any effective attacks on the Utes, because they didn't know the land. The Utes also started alliances with other native groups around the area, which helped them out a lot. They were luckily able to resist the Spanish then. Over time, the Utes were forced out of their own homes. It was caused due to the continued pressure and attacks from European settlers and the US government. They lost much of their ancestral land and eventually relocated to the reservations. The federal government forced the Utes from Utah to move into the Ute reservations. It was caused to prevent conflict between the US settlers and the Utes. Later on, the federal government dramatically shrank the reservations. This was caused due to the gold and silver being found in Utah. The Utes were furious when being notified about the people coming onto their land. The Utes saw settlers as they were disrupting the way of life. They were heavily impacted and forced into making difficult deals with the settlers. This ended up causing a lot more conflict in the Utes' lives. Settlers and miners were flooding into the area without realizing the land they were on. The Utes tried their hardest to be able to defend their own land, but it ended up not working out well for them. It was a very tough battle to beat. Getting used to the reservations were difficult for the Utes. Since they were forced out of the land that they already knew so well, they had to restart fresh. The reservations were less fertile areas, which caused it to be hard to go back to their own traditional lifestyles. A ton of restrictions were made about their own movements and activities. It was a very challenging and heartbreaking transition for the Utes. Today they continue to keep their tradition alive. Gladly, storytelling is a big part of their tradition as well. Throughout each generation, the Utes will pass down their stories and the stories they've heard. The legend and history of the Utes live on.